Hi everyone, this is Koinzell here. So following up from my previous video where I did a guide on the damage buckets and the changes to it, right? Which is effectively where a lot of the damage bonuses are now additive all within one bucket, and the importance of getting vulnerable and critical strike now, which is increased so much that it's kind of crazy. It becomes mandatory for you to get vulnerable and the critical strike related glyphs as well. Okay. Now, in terms of the build, the update, I actually created a separate build altogether. Rather, I copied the initial two-hand bludgeoning weapon build and created one with the focus, given the new information that we know, as well as like whether we really need disempower in the end game, whether or not we need specific glyphs, etc. So first off, I will start by talking about the Paragon board, because that will kind of lead you to see how we change or respec our skills accordingly. So first off, first board doesn't change except for the glyph. You'll notice that we are using the territorial now. Previously, I was using the Ira. So now that we know that damage while berserking and damage to the close enemies are now all additive, there is greater value in us getting a higher percentage figure, in this case the 9.6% here at level 20 of territorial versus the level 20 at 7.2% increased damage roll. Berserking versus 9.6% too close. So the 9.6% is just straight up better. And both of them gives us 10% damage reduction. In fact, this only gives us damage reduction against elites, but this gives us damage reduction against close. So it can be white mobs as well, but it's a different factor where you need to be close. But we are doing a whirlwind, so we will always be close to our enemies, at least on the first contact before we spin away. So yep, the first glyph is now territorial. Now that we know the information about the damage buckets being one big additive bucket. The next glyph you see here, interestingly enough, is the first spot is no longer Blood Rage. I did a whole guide previously talking about like you are looking at the first look at the legendary node that you want, and then you choose see whether there's rare node clusters that you want, etc. Now another factor to take into consideration was the fact that the earlier the bot, the easier it is to get an additional bonus on the rare nodes. So which is also a reason why we do Blood Rage as our first bot previously. This is the old build, or rather the build before we have all this new information, especially all the pre-launch information after the NDA on 30th May was lifted. So I think you look at this bot, it makes sense. But when we look at the current Blood Rage that we have in the new build, we no longer have we actually dropped one of the rare node cluster in order for us to optimize in different ways. And it turns out that the Warbringer bot now, because Fury on kill is really, really good. Okay, getting Fury on killing enemies is really, really good in terms of our Fury upkeep. So we are getting this, and once we get this, we now have 3 rare nodes. And since Fortify is actually pretty good now as a additional source of damage, both damage reduction and increased damage, depending on whether you get those nodes which you were in this build. So then we progress along to get this, right? So now that we've invested this amount of nodes here, we can also get the damage while Fortify as well as the increased Fortify generation. And that just naturally becomes a path where along the way we get all the nodes that are beneficial to us. And since this has the most rare nodes, right, it becomes the first bot. Simple as that. Now remember, this is an endgame build. This is not a leveling build, okay? So we get our first bot here, and yeah, there you go. All the maximum number of yellow or rare nodes that we have. And it also helps that Warbringer's defensive rare node in the glyph is all resistance, which is something that we will need on the Barbarian. Because Barbarian gets more armor innately from his main stat rather than resistance. Okay. So this much is important. Now the next thing to note is, as we move on to the next bot, you'll notice that this is a brand new board. It's Decimator. I've never used Decimator previously. We were using Blood Rage, followed by Weapon Master, Warbringer, and Carnage. Now, we have to drop Weapon Master. So this means that we drop this attack speed and some physical damage. It's fine, I guess, overall. It's a little painful to drop all resistance here. We also drop the damage to elites as well as bonus movement speed after killing elites. Now, dropping armor is not that bad because armor has a diminishing return at the higher tiers. So yes, we are dropping Weapons Master. But is it worth it? Oh, it's definitely worth it because Decimator is completely vulnerable focused. And what did I just say in the previous video? Vulnerable is now a super important must-have bucket to focus and invest on unless you are doing group roles and relying on other players to apply vulnerable. Okay, but in a solo play, vulnerable is your top #1 priority together with critical strike. So this board here, within its glyph radius, we get vulnerable damage increase along with all the blue nodes and both the magic and rare nodes. We also get damage reduction from vulnerable enemies, and since we are going to be applying vulnerable as much as possible, with a fairly consistent rate of application per se, it's worthwhile investing all this. And that means that we should get Marshal here, because Marshal gives you the 190 plus 192% bonus to magic nodes. What this means is that we basically get almost double of each of these magic nodes, which is double of 6%, so we get almost 12%. Additional 12% damage reduction from vulnerable enemies. And more importantly, we also get the vulnerable damage increase. We have 3x 5% vulnerable damage magic nodes here. That's 15%. A plus 192% is pretty much 30%. Maybe it's like 29% or something like that, or maybe 28, but it's close to 30%. So with this additional 30% vulnerable damage, and remember vulnerable damage is a separate bucket by itself, this is very good. Okay, getting Marshal here is almost a must, or any other glyph that gives you bonus to magic nodes, because we get so much vulnerable damage from this. And we're also going to get vulnerable damage from our gear, not to worry. But because Marshal is an important part of our build, due to the cooldown reduction of shouts, it completely fits very nicely in here. And strength-wise, along the path, this is also very efficient. You get 1, 2, 3, 4, done. Along with the rare nodes, you get your 40 strength. And that brings us next to the next board. But before that, you notice that I did spend some notes in getting the legendary effect here, which is basically a two-handed slashing weapon attacks. Give you up to 8% chance to make enemies vulnerable for 2 seconds. So effectively, we are getting one more source of vulnerable. Now, its lucky hit and 8% is actually pretty low. If you're using Whirlwind, then you effectively, let's say we assume that you have about 40% lucky hit from your gear, which is very doable, since we now see how the stats are like, the efficacies are like at like level 50 plus, 60 plus. So it's definitely doable. I did the math already. So if you have 40% increased lucky hit chance that you see in your status screen, couple that with the 25% on Whirlwind lucky hit, you basically get about 3%, almost 3% chance. So it's kind of low, right? But Whirlwind hits multiple times, pretty fast. So it's fairly decent. I mean, I wouldn't, if this is your only source of vulnerable, then there's an issue. But this is more like an add-on to the exploit glyph as well as the passive that we have, which is this pressure point, okay, giving us up to 30% chance. Effectively, with Whirlwind and the 40% lucky hit on your gear, etc., you basically get about 10%, 10 point something percent, 10.5%, close to 10.5% chance to make enemies vulnerable. Okay, so now we have 3 different sources of our vulnerable. One of them is 100%, and I'll talk more about it later. But more importantly, the reason why we go for this is because we want to get this. We want to get more vulnerable damage. Okay, we want to get more vulnerable damage. It's a freaking separate multiplier by itself. Although each of these is additive within its own vulnerable bucket, but we're still getting it. And you notice that I'm not even spending on this. We already have enough. We have a huge amount of damage bonuses. If everything is together, right, we already have a huge amount of damage bonuses, so we don't really need these 3 nodes. And since we are getting this, it's only 2 nodes more to get the legendary node here. So we might as well get this and get us a third source, even if the chance on this is low. And then we move on to the next board, which is finally our Blood Rage. Now, the other reason why I'm moving the boards in terms of priority, right, in the order, right, like Blood Rage moving from 1 to 3. Another reason is also because the number of rare nodes that we can here is lesser. That's number 1. Number 2, it's also because we are trying to maximizing the we're trying to maximize the board with regards to the number of nodes that you have. So, for example, the territorial, I shouldn't say territorial. The ref here, this board here, the Warbringer board is the one where we have the highest number of dexterity. Okay, this is the one where we have the most amount of dexterity nodes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 is the highest on barbarian boards. So this 7 dexterity here coupled with the 2 more magic gives us 9x 16.44% increased critical strike damage over here. That's very nice. And generating fury from critical strike is also really good, because we get a lot of it from Whirlwind, especially with that aspect of the Dire Whirlwind aspect. Okay, so now we go on to Blood Rage, and you notice that I actually ended up picking Imbiber over here, which is very, very different from what we usually do, right? If I didn't remember wrongly, one of the willpower node that we always get is actually Disempower. But it has basically been shown that we don't really need Disempower to maintain our shout uptime. So we can completely drop Disempower and go for a Glyph that gives us the highest percentage of damage, higher than 7.2%, which is like the norm per se. Most of the damage bonuses on the Glyph at level 20 gives you 7.2% per 5 stat purchased. The Imbiber gives you 8.82%, so it's slightly higher. But more importantly, it is actually fairly easy for us to maintain this with a stronger potion healing that it provides, number 1. Number 2, with the Fortify that we do. And you'll see more sources of Fortify that I'm getting from the skill tree, not just from this effect here. Okay, we are getting more Fortify as well. I'll show that later when we talk about the skill tree and the gear. So this is the reason why we are using Imbiber over here. Because I was looking at the values that we have at level 20. A lot of them are just 7.2%. I can get Blood Feeder, but it's just 7.2%. I don't need the increased critical strike chance because we do have the aspect of Dire Whirlwind. Right? And if I use a weapon specific kind of build, it's also still 7.2%. So this is the reason why I end up going for the Imbiber. Now, on to the next board. Oh, and obviously we get the Blood Rage, right? Because we are doing a Berserking build here. I do want this a additional source for us to get Berserking. Now, granted, it's killing enemies and you need 10% chance, but I think that it's fairly okay in the prot rate. And as usual, we get the Berserking duration here. Okay. That brings us to our final board, which is the 4th board after excluding the starting board. So again, we get Berserking duration. And we also move on to get the 2 rare nodes here. And our most important glyph per se, which is Exploit. Now, I know it feels bad that Exploit as the most important glyph is on the last board. But again, this is endgame, remember? And the other reason is, if you look at this board, right? After populating all the nodes that we want, there is no efficient way for us to exit this board. The number of nodes you require to exit this board is pretty high. It's about 7 on this and 7 on this. So that's a waste. That's the reason why we are putting this board as the last, so that we save 2 nodes. Because if you look at this, we just need 5. Okay? We also need 5. Typically, you should need 5 from the glyph radius. In some cases, yes, it takes more. So it's a bit unfortunate. Oh, right. I actually see some optimization here. 3 plus 7. We actually have a route where we can get 5. So I can get 2 more nodes. So more optimization. Cool. No worries. I'll update this later. We just move the boards around. We then remove this. Go for this route over here. That will give us additional 2 nodes. The additional 2 nodes, actually, if you know what I actually really want to put them in? These two, the resistance. Yes, resistance is important. Now, if you don't want to put in resistances, you can also get armor if you want to, but I definitely recommend the all resist. Okay. Yeah. So this is a happy thing where we managed to find one more route of optimization. Okay, you know what? Let me show you guys the completed one now. Okay, I have the updated board here. We managed to find a optimization spot. So we save ourselves 2 nodes. Okay. And those 2 nodes go into the resistance here. All resist here. So additional 4% all resistance. That's good. We need all resistance for the survivor. Okay. Obviously there are other options, such as getting this, but I think that the 2% resistance will be the one with the biggest impact. Owing to the fact that armor has a diminishing return to your non-physical resistance, the higher the tier you go to. Okay, higher word tier. So now with this optimization, in terms of the order, the board is still the same. The only difference is just the positioning. Yeah, I mean it looks like this now. A upside down L, essentially. And as what I was saying earlier, we do get ourselves the blood rage, and on these notes here, we go over here, we get our berserking duration. So pretty much the build is done here, and vulnerable. The reason why vulnerable is on this board, like I said, is because Carnage is the one with the least optimized route to exit. That's number one. Number two is also because Carnage has the second highest number of dexterity nodes across the boards that we are having. So the one with the highest dexterity nodes for us was Warbringer. Okay, Warbringer. Warbringer has 7 normal dexterity nodes plus 2 magic nodes. The Carnage has six normal ones. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 plus 2 magic rolls. So that is 8x 7.2% vulnerable damage for us. And the most important thing of the exploit glyph for Barbarian is the fact that it allows you to apply vulnerable whenever you damage an enemy. It has a cooldown of 20 seconds, but this cooldown is per enemy. So after your first 3 seconds, in theory, as you're hitting with your whirlwind, you get additional chance on both the decimator legendary node as well as our pressure point. Okay, that's how we maintain our vulnerable per se. But most important is that you get that guaranteed 3 seconds of vulnerable. So yep, this is how the Paragon board looks like after now all the updates that we have, right? I don't think I have to change this anymore. This is probably going to be our endgame build and target to go for. I'm happy because now this board has 3 different legendary nodes. It has a lot of optimization in terms of both the vulnerable and the critical strike related glyph, which is rough, both obtained. So in terms of just a quick summary, right? The first glyph that we have is territorial, mainly for that 9.6% over any other of the 7.2%, since they're all in the same bucket. Then we have the ref, which gives us increased critical strike damage, and we put it on the highest dexterity board that we can get, the highest number of dexterity nodes, which in this case is 7 normal plus 2 magic. Next we have Marshal. Okay, Marshal, and Marshal is maximizing our vulnerable damage magic nodes and reduction. And here we again we are going for higher than 7.2, so we are using Imbiber, and we should be able to maintain our healthy. Even if we can't, taking 1 potion should help us get there with this 30% increased potion healing. Not to mention we also get increased healing from willpower. Okay. And lastly, vulnerable, right? So yeah, I'm very happy with this board right now, how it turns out. But you notice that this is 2-handed slashing weapon, which means now we can't use 2-handed bludgeoning weapon because previously we were looking at using 2-handed bludgeoning weapon. Now we have to use a 2-handed slashing weapon. So it can be sword, it can be axe. So what this means is that if you compare the skill builds, right, We obviously drop the bludgeoning related passives, concussion and wallop. Now we just get ourselves this increased critical strike damage on two-handed weapons, and it's X. So that's even better. Okay, that's number one. Number two, you notice that basically our generator is just to meet the minimum requirement. We are actually not using our generator here because this is how it looks like. It's pretty much been tested and confirmed by the pre-launch streamers that this is a build where we can drop the Fury generator. And it's always important to drop Fury generator because you only have 6 slots of skills. Fury generator taking one up is a huge waste. Dropping it gives you a huge boost because it's either defensive boost if you take defensive skill or offensive boost if you take offensive skill, right? But more importantly, in Diablo 3, this is the same thing. Okay, Diablo 3 also only has 6 active slots. And those 6 active slots, once you can drop a Fury generator, those builds usually are the top tier builds most of the time. Alright? So this is really just there for the minimum requirement. We are not using this. Pressure point, whirlwind, these are all important. And since we are using a slashing weapon now, we can actually use the Furious Whirlwind, which technically speaking gives us more damage increase, 40% versus 30% here. Okay. Although this is base damage, but I have to see how it works out when it says like base damage here. Okay. Now, additional life, we still want it because life is important. Okay. This is the same. Okay, we are getting Iron Skin here as a defensive measure, partly because Iron Skin also gives us Fortify. In fact, if you cast it when you are below 50% life, you get a 30% Fortify. That's really good. And Warcry, instead of getting this, we get the 15% Fortify. So now I have 30% Fortify here and 15% Fortify here, as well as getting 12% Fortify every time we swap. Every time we use up 75 Fury over here. So we have a very decent amount of generation in terms of our Fortify. So that leads me to the next point here, which is that we are getting the counter offensive, because counter offensive is again a X increase, a separate bucket multiplier increase, and it's the only condition for it is Fortify over 50% of your maximum life, which you will definitely achieve, because we are also getting unbridled rage here rather than unconstrained. Yes, we are going for unbridled rage here, so that we get our Fortify earlier. That's number one. It also synergizes with this invigorating fury, healing us for each 100 fury spent. And I want this so that we get more sustain as well. Okay, other than getting the shots, you notice that previously we were using damage reduction here, but since damage reduction has diminishing returns, and we have something like challenging shot that reduces so much, right? At level 5, and this is level 5, we still have Harlequin Crest to consider. So we go for more heals. And the heals then in turn help us to maintain our imbiber, right? Our imbiber gets a huge boost. Or rather, okay, I shouldn't say a huge boost, but it helps us to maintain our well healthy with the heals that we have, the maximum life increase that we have in the skill tree. And obviously hamstring, this is something that you always get, right? I shouldn't have to talk about this, but essentially you always apply bleeding and you always apply slow. And also we are using two-handed slashing weapon. If you're using a two-handed axe, then you get the two-handed sword expertise, and vice versa. And what this does is that it allows us to always get this 9% increased critical strike chance. Now I know that we have an aspect of Dire Whirlwind, but I think it's important to get this as well, so that it takes lesser time to channel and hit the 100% crit rate, or rather critical strike chance. And likewise, Pit Fighter, we get X 9% increase. So this is a separate multiplier. Again, good stuff. So yeah, the synergy is coming together very nicely, and we are getting all the important X increase multipliers here, which is all the separate damage bucket that I talked about in my previous video. So skill tree is done. Now we talk about gear. So gear wise, yeah, I wanted to elaborate further on the expertise. Now we are using Grandfather here because Grandfather is just so good. Don't forget that other than increasing crit damage, Grandfather also has the effects here where the other properties of a weapon can roll higher than normal, which means that the base damage of Grandfather is always higher than, say, a base damage two-hand bludgeoning weapon at the same level. That's huge. That means that we always hit harder with a Grandfather. And since now we are not using a two-hand bludgeoning weapon, we are using two-handed slashing, it frees us up to use Grandfather. Now, before you find Grandfather, let's say if you end up using a two-hand axe instead of two-hand sword, that's fine as well. If you use a two-hand axe, then you just change the expertise here to two-hand sword. And the reason why I want two-hand axe is because again it's related to vulnerable. X 15% increased damage to vulnerable enemies. It's X, guys. It's X, not plus. And we also get a plus 10% increased critical strike chance against vulnerable enemies, so even faster for us to hit the max critical strike chance on the aspect of the dire whirlwind. So aspect of the dire whirlwind gives you, okay, this is on a two-hand bludgeoning weapon, so this will be doubled. So we basically at the max potential wise, we get 20% for each second it's channeled, up to 80%. By making it such that from here we get 40+% increased crit chance, you get another 10% here, and some additional percentage from your dexterity, right? Effectively, we can get about 50 to 60, almost 60% crit rate. And with that 60% crit rate, it simply means that you just channel for 2 seconds and you get your 100% crit rate or critical strike chance. So I keep using crit rate because it's just easier to say, shorter syllables, rolls off the tongue nicely. But yes, this getting critical strike chance is still important on your gear, even if you have this, so that you get your higher crit rate, critical strike chance earlier. All right. And obviously for the weapons, we can get something like aspect of limitless reach because we generate so much fury that this actually helps for us. Not to mention whirlwind snapshots, so we can snapshot a 30% increase. Likewise for the Age Master, a 20%. And the rest of it is pretty straightforward, right? All the shot related in terms of fury, cooldown reduction. But the codex, the amulet slot that I'm using here is actually the relentless berserkers aspect. Because like I said, I do try to focus more on getting our berserking uptime. So this lucky hit here basically on the amulet means that at a max roll we get 60% chance lucky hit to extend duration of berserking by 1 second, double if it's critical, and we are going to do critical most of the time, so it's 2 seconds. And 2 seconds extension along with the 42% increase berserking duration that we get, basically is 2.84 seconds. So almost 3 seconds. So this is pretty good. And 60% is nice. Okay, getting up to 60% is nice because when you multiply that by your whirlwinds based lucky hit as well as the lucky hit on your gear, etc., it still gives us about 23% if I didn't remember wrongly. Yeah, about 23% or 20%. Either way, it's still a better rate than the vulnerable, and it's a decent rate given how fast whirlwind hits, generally speaking. So this definitely helps a lot. Now, aspect of grasping whirlwind is pretty standard stuff, and you see that we are actually going all out on the uniques because number one, temerity. You remember all the healing that we have in our skill tree? We have healing from our shouts, we have healing from spending fury. So now this gives us barrier. We are going to get this barrier, and if you get a good roll on this, it's 80% of your maximum life. It helps a lot in your survival. Okay? Not to mention movement speed from potion is nice. Next, you have the whirlwind unique. So this helps again in terms of damage. It helping you to do a chunk of fire damage. And it helps that there's lucky hit chance here as well. And fury on kill and rents to whirlwind. This comes together very nicely. Now, Rage of Harrogath. To be honest, we don't really need this because I've seen the endgame builds that the select few streamers who got to do the pre-launch access showed and shared. So we don't really need this to get our uptime on the shots, but it's nice to have. The stats on the gear is also good. Okay. And well, obviously this is good. I don't think I even need to talk more about this, right? Cooldown reduction, all stats, maximum life damage reduction, and more importantly, 4 ranks to all skills. But here's the thing. This is an endgame build, so we have 5 units here. But you don't really need these units for the build to work. The build works without the units, even without this whirlwind specific unit. It works. What all these units do is that they allow you to go further. But the fundamental build itself works without the units. So this is what I really, really like. And obviously, in terms of like substitutes before you get the units, you can use something like Spell of Disobedience. You will get this because of the amount of bleeding that we have, a lot of DOT, a lot of damage from number of hits from Whirlwind, etc. So this is always good. And since we are doing Fortify, you can always get yourself this, okay, Aspect of Numbing Wrath, which is a Codex. Or if you prefer, you can even go get yourself Iron Blood, more damage reduction from bleeding enemies. You can also get this. This also gives you Fortify because we have Berserking. But to be honest, I think that the aspect of Numbing Wrath will be better because it's not lucky hit. It's based on Fury generated via maximum Fury, which we will have a lot. Right? We are able to constantly maintain our Fury. So yeah, this is good. So there's a lot of substitute options before you get the uniques anyway. Right? Likewise for here, the three that I spoke about, you can even get all three. Right? Likewise for here, there's a lot of options that we can go for. You can even get this as well. Okay, this is decent too. So there's a lot of you can also get this, get some additional bleeding damage while you're dealing damage with berserking. So there's a lot of aspects that we can use before we get the units. What I really like the most is that the units are not important for the build to work, but yet as you get them, it helps make your build even stronger. This is coming together very nicely. And we have our gems wise is obviously vulnerable because I've already said how important vulnerable is. Then we have the increase of your maximum life. So okay, because we do have the imbiber, so we have this damage bonus while healthy. So it's better to get maximum life rather than sapphire for the damage reduction, generally speaking, so that your then with your threshold to lose that 20% of life to maintain your well healthy, that 20% is higher when you have a higher maximum life. Okay. Oh, this here, I'm talking about more endgame, so that's why we use 8% resistance to all elements. But in the earlier tiers, right, world tiers, right, it's actually okay to use armor. Okay. Yeah. But I do believe at the end game this is better. But we'll have to see how it goes. But I do like how the entire build is working out with regards to like the new information, all the pre-launch information that we have, the updated damage buckets model as well. So it comes together very nicely. That's what I want to say. And the board is also very optimized now with all the focus on vulnerable, even getting the decimator board, which is also giving us vulnerable. Okay. So anyway, thanks everyone for watching. I hope the video has been helpful to you guys in crafting a Whirlwind Berserker that is really, really strong and really ready to take on the end game. Right. This is going to be my target, and I'm going to, for me, right, when I start my barbarian, I'm going to probably do a HOTA build first until we get the aspect of Dire Whirlwind. Then I'll switch to probably a Whirlwind build while we level, and eventually get ourselves the level 50. Then from there, we'll see how to optimize the Paragon bots from there. Right. So endgame build wise, this is fantastic. This got me excited to use the Whirlwind Berserker again, as opposed to the Overpower HOTA, especially because of how important Vulnerable is now. Alright, thanks everyone for watching. If you like the content, remember my video and click subscribe for more. Bye.